guess this is live, this microphone, right? Is there anybody who can't hear me? If you can't hear me, I'll back up and make sure you can't hear me. Oh, I guess we're all here. All four of us are here. Thanks everybody for coming. This is quite a building, isn't it? It really is. Love it or leave it, but it's quite a building, no matter what. And I'm Lynn Jewell. I'm the chair of the Committee of 100. And our distinguished panel here, starting on your right, is Eleanor Reed, yeah, that's right. Eleanor Reed, and she's a teacher here. And so some of you had a tour with her, so that's nice. The next person in the middle is Kate, a student. What's your last name? Hefner. Kate Hefner, and that's Kate. One thing about this school is we get to call each other by first names. So I'm Lynn, Eleanor, Kate, and this is Casey Robinson, the principal. So Casey's going to talk, and then Eleanor, and then a student, and we're giving them like 30 minutes, 20 minutes. That's all you get. And then we'll be Q&A, and then it should be around 8:30. And then we do Q&A, question and answers. Remember, people, we're on camera here. We're on TV. It's going to be for posterity. So ask your questions gently, please. Okay, Casey.
All right, well, welcome. Thank you all so much for coming and spending an evening here with us at our new building. For a few of you who were on a tour with me, some of this will be a little repetitive, but we tonight want to just give a little bit of an overview about the HB Woodlawn program. Lynn asked that we talk about what makes HB Woodlawn a different option in Arlington Public Schools, and then to talk a little bit about the design process and moving into this new building. So I was telling my tour group that at our old building, which was on Vacation Lane, I could confidently say that I had spent more than half my life there. I started at HB Woodlawn as a 7th grader, and I graduated from there, went off to college with no intention of becoming a teacher, went to grad school, moved back to DC, and it took a year or two, but I got wooed back to HB Woodlawn, and I started here as a 7th grade teacher, and then taught 12th grade, and then became an assistant principal, and now this is my 5th year as the principal at HB Woodlawn. So, we always talk about that there were sort of guiding principles that founded HB Woodlawn, and even though the times have changed, we try to stay true to some of those core principles. And that was a big part of the move from Vacation Lane to our new site here on Wilson Boulevard. So those of you, even if you didn't take a tour, this is a very different kind of school. It is 7 floors, and you probably didn't get to see all of them. And it's in a very different kind of environment, fronting out onto Wilson Boulevard, very little of the traditional green space that you would expect at a school. And while we would have preferred to stay at our old location on Vacation Lane, we also decided we needed to embrace this change, and that this was a way in which HB Woodlawn could contribute to addressing the capacity issues in APS. So through the entire process, we have tried to stay true to what I'll talk briefly about, which is our 3 sort of core pillars. And these were the founding ideas in 1971. If you don't know the history of HB Woodlawn, it started as a high school program, grades 9 through 12 at the Woodlawn building, which is now where hospice is. And then in 1972, APS started a alternative middle school at Hoffman Boston. And then in 1978, as they were having the exact opposite problem that they're having now, and we were closing schools, they merged Hoffman Boston and Woodlawn into the site at Vacation Lane. And because neither program would give up their name, it became the Hoffman Boston Woodlawn program, eventually shortened to HB Woodlawn. And the 3 core ideas there, and that we've always tried to adhere to are the idea of self-governance, self-directed learning, and community. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what self-governance looks like, and then Eleanor is going to talk a little bit about that, and then Kate is going to talk from a student perspective what that looks like. So when I go to speak with prospective parents who are thinking about sending their student to HB Woodlawn, you know, we talk about what does self-governance look like. One part of self-governance is just being able to govern yourself as an individual. We give students a lot of choice and freedom in how they spend their time, in choices about their academics. And so the basic idea is that not every student comes to HB Woodlawn in 6th grade ready to govern themselves, but they will learn those skills over the time that they're here. And so we give them opportunities to practice. Not everybody eats lunch in the cafeteria. You can eat lunch wherever you want. And is there a teacher sitting there next to you making sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing? No. We trust that students generally make good decisions, and we give them that autonomy to do so. So self-governance on an individual basis is happening all the time. We have very few rules, in part because we believe that most students don't need them. And so we just address the students who are having an issue with a particular thing, rather than telling everyone you can't do something when we wouldn't expect most kids to do that. So Eleanor is going to talk a little bit about town meeting, which is our more global governance system, which is something that is unique to HB Woodlawn.
Thank you. I'm Eleanor. I've been teaching here at HB for 13 years, and I've been teaching in Arlington County for about 26 years now. And before I was at HB, I was at the Career Center, which is another sort of uniquely governed and structured place in Arlington that people don't always know a lot about. So town meeting is our governing body. So at HB, every decision that is not curriculum is made with the agreement of teachers, students, and even parents have a vote at town meeting. So everybody has one vote. So my one vote is the same weight as Kate's vote, and if Kate gets organized, she can bring the numbers and make sure that what she wants happens. So we run this every week in the library. There is a little bit of a classic democracy going on in that some people don't come to town meeting, but the people who do are really engaged. It's, I'll let Kate talk about in a moment how it's run, the process of picking a chair and everything. But what's really interesting about town meeting is if somebody comes to town meeting with a schedule change that would change the entire schedule, we discuss it and debate it and work on it and vote on it together. And so a 6th grader could bring that motion. There have been some really interesting motions in the history of town meeting, but we don't just do motions, we also have discussions. So we had an extensive discussion one time about AP courses. And some students brought the issue of should we still continue to have AP courses when HB is an alternative program and we don't have to. And that was a really amazing discussion. It went on for several weeks. And in the end, there was no motion brought forward from that. It was people just decided they were okay with the way it was. Some motions are bizarre. Occasionally, 6th graders will arrive not understanding why we don't have a school mascot and school colors, and they'll bring it up. And this, 11-year-old will stand in front of teachers, seniors, juniors, and sometimes with a little gentle coaching from a teacher or from an older student, they'll bring up their motion and say, we think we should have a mascot. And the discussion will go on, generally for several weeks, because we're a good democracy. We believe in an extended legislative process. And eventually, they will get something. And so I believe what happened that time a few years ago is that after extensive discussion, the spork was voted on as our school object. Later on, it was changed to a panda. I believe currently it's a panda. But what's amazing about these discussions is that an 18-year-old with total respect will listen to that student and agree and disagree politely, and when you, after a while, go to town meeting, you can never go to any other meeting again without noticing how much people interrupt each other. Because what we do at town meeting is keep a speaker's list. So if you want to say something, you raise your hand, and the co-chair puts your name on the speaker's list, and it may be another 5 or 10 minutes before it's your turn, because you got to wait for everybody else. And so it's just this incredible process of watching students and adults listen, think about it, make a few notes about what they want to say, sometimes agree, sometimes disagree, but it's a really incredible process. And whether it's a motion for a school dance or a motion to change the schedule, there's a great deal of respect given to the people who come to the process, who bring those things up. And so it's really neat over the process of the 7 years that students are here to watch them grow into those leadership roles by participating in town meeting. So Kate, why don't you talk about what the process is like, where we pick a chair and everything like that, and your perspective on town meeting.
So I am new to HB as of this year. I was really lucky to be picked as an 8th grader as one of the rising 9th graders in the 9th grade class. When I first encountered town meeting, I was amazed by it, and I don't think I've ever, maybe once, missed another town meeting after that. Town meeting works like this. It starts, I'm going to say, at around 9:25 to 9:30ish, and the first thing is we bring up who's going to be the chair, co-chair, and secretary. The chair reads out the schedule, and he or she or they read out the schedule and point to people and tell them they can speak, and kind of runs it, and anybody can be nominated for it. You have to be nominated by somebody, and then eventually we all vote. The person in first place is chair. Second place is co-chair. They make the speakers list, and they tell the and they tell the chair what's happening. And the secretary writes or types down what happens during this town meeting. And we actually have several binders in the library that are recordings of what happened at town meetings in the past. And do you know how long it went back?
I think probably back to 1972.
Wow.
Yeah,
Oh.
I know, right?
I haven't looked through them, but I'm planning to at some point. But as an HB student, it's really cool that I get to bring up ideas. For example, there have been schedule changes ideas, discussions. One of these discussions this week actually was, do we really want our independent block, or also known as I block? And though it wasn't a motion, it was a real discussion on, do we want to have this freedom? Can people control it? And we, it kind of ended on a stalemate between two sides. And sometimes it's the teachers versus the students, or yeah, sometimes. And sometimes it's the students versus the seniors, and but some of the craziest and most amazing stuff can happen in that time, because you actually make a change. You know you are changing the school with your vote. And even if there are 10 kids in the room, you can still make big changes throughout your school.
As a last thing, why don't you tell people how we agree at town
Oh, something cool that Eleanor just reminded me about is instead of saying I agree, we do a simple fist nod. And that shows that we agree and we understand and what people are saying, instead of having to speak out and interrupt people.
And that's another thing, that once you've learned that and you're talking and all of a sudden you see all these hands go up and nod and you can tell you've got the room, you're like, call the question. And that's the other thing that you realize after you participate in town meetings a little while, is that nobody else does Robert's Rules of Order correctly. It's supposed to be motion, second, then discussion. But every organization almost that I've ever been in does extensive discussion, motion vote. So, you know, here we teach them right.
No, let me see it. Thanks, everybody. Kate, I have a question for you. We're going to sit down as we do questions, okay? Because I think this cable reaches. Are these two people at the ends here, are they telling the truth about this? That's one thing. And because it's just between you and me here. What do you think?
Oh yeah, they're totally telling the truth, and I trust them 100% completely.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Timon is going to run the microphone down here. Whoever has a question will go down here, and Timon will handle the microphone. And don't worry, you will be able to be on TV because we have 3 cameras here for you. And the first comment here is I want to ask Casey, because there's another program here, Eunice Kennedy Shriver program, and I want her to discuss that just a little bit. Casey.
Okay, so as Lynn mentioned, HB Woodlawn has been co-located with another program since 1995. So at our old building, we were co-located as well. It was called the Stratford program at that time. When we moved here, we renamed that program the Eunice Kennedy Shriver program. It serves about 50 students with significant disabilities, with a range of different disabilities, but it is a specialized program that offers a really warm and nurturing place for those students. We are fortunate in this building that we have a lot more interaction with the Shriver students, between Shriver students and HB Woodlawn students. This year we have what we call co-taught PE classes, where HB Woodlawn and Shriver students are in PE classes together. And we have something that we call the Shriver cohort, where HB Woodlawn students, rather than taking an elective or as their elective, they take their electives with the Shriver students. So they might be in music class with the Shriver students, or in art class, or being reading buddies. So where we're trying to build more authentic relationships between HB Woodlawn and Shriver students. So the design of the building was intended to make it so that we would interact, and in our old building, the Shriver program was on just 1 floor, and now they're on 2 floors that are shared floors where HB Woodlawn and Shriver students all have classes on the same floors.
I don't see anybody down there waiting for a question, so I will have another. Just walk over there to the microphone because we don't have one to pass around today. Kate, my daughter, also Kate, went to the Stratford school program. And do the students here participate and become buddies and so forth with the kids down there? In other words, did my daughter get a nice buddy like you?
Yeah, so I am, as I said, new, so I'm still getting into all these types of programs, but throughout my classes, I see and interact with the Shriver students, and it's really cool that we get to do that, because I don't think I've really experienced that in any other school too. And my club, Green Club, we actually just recently got a grant to do a gardening program that involved Shriver with it too, and we're planning to plant in some cool boxes, and we need to bring this up in town meeting actually, but plant in some boxes outside the 3rd floor terrace, and they should be wheelchair accessible, and hopefully that'll be able to bring Shriver and HG just a bit closer in that respect.
Thank you. I see a question there. Now, just give your name. Whoops, I guess it's there first. You don't need to say who you represent or anything, because we're all citizens here of Arlington, I think. And so just give your name, and that's enough.
Hi, good evening. I'm Kathy Scruggs. I'm a retired APS teacher, and I actually taught in, I think it's about 14 different moved around. I started at Kenmore, and then I went to Wakefield, and then I moved down to elementary level. I was struck by two comments. One in particular was the responding to the capacity challenges of APS. And I think tied in there is also talking about the democracy, this pure democracy at the town meetings. I question that because, to me, equity should really be the identification of a public school. And I think that H.B. Woodlawn does not exhibit the equity that all of Arlington should be striving for. I question why you don't have the county-wide percentage of free and reduced lunch. Why don't you have, it's a county-wide program. Why isn't there the percentage of students of color? Why is it that you don't even have an ESOL HILT program? So kids who don't speak English in 6th grade, they can't come to your school. Frankly, I would like to see this beautiful building used as a school for the arts for at least 2,000 students or 3,000. So I have been disturbed by this program since the white parents slept out for 3 nights back in the 70s to get their kid into this school, just when we were integrating them.
Okay, thanks. None of us in this room are prepared really to answer that because we need to vote for the school board and the county folks. I mean, your thoughts are good, but I'll let Casey answer, of course. But she has an opinion like Kate does.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of different comments in that question. I'd be happy to address any of those parts. Yes, HB Woodlawn is an option program. Our charge comes from the school board as an option program. A lot of things have changed at HB Woodlawn over the last few years. We have been working diligently to make some of those changes, structural changes. 2 years ago, we finally got the school board to change the policy of how students are admitted to HB Woodlawn in terms of you now have to attend like the various neighborhood schools. And as a result of that change in our 6th and 7th grade, we have we have 50% or less white students in our 6th and 7th grade. And it is much more reflective of the demographics of Arlington as a whole. In terms of free and reduced lunch, we do a lot of outreach to our elementary schools and work closely with counselors to try to encourage students to come. And we have seen that rate increase. I assume that over time, as these new lottery changes are implemented 6 through 12, we'll see that change happen. While we don't have a complete EL program at 6th grade, we do have a long-standing and very successful EL program here, English Learner program, for students that arrive into the United States at age 17 or 18. And we have about 90 students here who are in that program and are able to earn a high school diploma here if they were not able to do so in their home country. So we have a robust and strong EL program at the high school level. And we are getting an increasing number of students who are English learners at the middle school level as our demographics change.
It's not for me to make comments here, but I asked that same question to a former superintendent in Arlington, and I said, well, that school shouldn't exist. I mean, I'm playing a little devil's advocate. And he said, no, you're looking at it opposite. He said, all schools should exist like HB. And it's a different way of looking at things. And unless there's any more additions to this, Timon, you ready for a question here? All right. Now, just say who you are.
Yes, the name is Mike Anderson. I have no children, but I'm a taxpayer and a neighbor. Congratulations on your new facility. 2 quick questions. How common nationally is of a school. I've never heard of it before. Do any other districts in America have it? And then two, more importantly, is what was wrong with the existing Arlington public school system that people felt the need to create a unique school such as this?
So when the program was created in the 1970s, I was not around, but the history, as I've been taught from my predecessors and in reading documents, there were a number of schools with similar philosophy in the 1970s. There was a movement towards what were called democratic schools at the time, that tried to increase student voice and choice in their education, and that as students were starting to feel more alienated from more traditional comprehensive schools, there was this idea of bringing out ideas like town meeting and giving students a forum for discussion, for being able to talk things through with teachers, with administrators, where it was less hierarchical and more democratic. Over time, we've had a number of students, and I've had a number of graduate students who've come to ask about HB Woodlawn and study HB Woodlawn, and many of those programs that were started in the 1970s have no longer exist. And the ones that do tend to be private schools, not public schools. So we're one of the few public schools that, with this idea, that continues to exist as a public school.
Oh, okay.
Eleanor, comment, please.
Sure. And we have to say goodbye to Kate because our folks are here to pick them up. Thanks, Kate. I think that, I agree with what Casey said. There was this moment, like those of us who are educators, like we read the open classroom, and I think a lot of us, now, I wasn't teaching at that time, but like when I later read the open classroom, I was like, oh my gosh, yes, this is incredible. This sort of system can work. And I think that Ray Anderson and the other people who wrote the proposal to the school board were essentially saying this can work, this sort of model. And so that's what happened, that moment.
Okay, Timon, who's next?
Hi there. My name is Brenton. I actually went to HB Woodlawn. I graduated in 1998. I can't really imagine not having gone to HB. It's really important to me, and it changed how I really saw the world. So I guess my question is, and I was hoping Kate could answer some of these, was how does the traditions that HB was carry over to this new space? And then also, how does the tradition of like town meeting help you move into this kind of weird new space that kind of changes the school? I can't really imagine HB in a different program. When I heard it was leaving, I was like, what's it going to be? How could it fit? So how'd that help?
Oh, Eleanor.
I'll give it a go and then I'll pass it on to you. I think if you look at the history of HB, there were multiple moves. And every time people said, how are we going to possibly do all the things we do in this new space? And we figured it out. And I think that's where we are right now. How do we figure it out? And along the way, not just last year, but for the last 4 years, really, since we knew this was happening, we were not only engaging as students and teachers with how do we do this, but helping each other process that change is hard. And so I think one of the things that was really amazing was, for me, like moving in is hard, and moving your whole classroom and 26 years of stuff is difficult. And I think a lot of the teachers those first few weeks were like, how is this working? But you know what? The students figured it out really quickly, that they enjoy being with each other, and they found these new spaces, and they figured out all the nooks and crannies. And it was at a middle school dance, and I asked a 6th grader, I said, because I was like at a little bit of a low ebb at that point, and it was, 8 o'clock on a Friday night when we should all be in bed. And I said, thank you. I said, what do you think of this place? And she said, oh my gosh, it's just so great. It's bright and colorful, and I have all these friends, and it's so much fun, and the teachers are so nice, and I just love it. And I thought, in 7 years, that's the experience. What you found with those people at that moment. and these kids finding it with these people at that moment. And it's shaped a little differently, and we have realized we have to work at it. Like, I don't see the same teachers I used to. I have to change the way I move to find my people. And that's what I've discovered. Like, it's still there because it's the people, not the building. But yeah, you have to work at it.
Something to add, Casey?
Yeah, just real quickly, and just in terms of how institutions deal with change, certainly as someone who, like I said, spent all my years in one place, we actually started doing what we called Transition Tuesdays about 2 years ago as we were planning for this. And, one of the very first activities we did is like, let's write down all the things that are important to us. And then we made columns like, is this thing possible in another space? If so, yes. Okay, great. How will we make that happen? If it's not, like, what will we lose if we don't do it, and how can we change that? So we tried to be really intentional, and groups of kids in TA came up with those lists, and we started it a couple years ago so that we had time to sort of think about it and plan for it. It's not the same, but we tried to hold on to those core pieces.
New buildings are always really hard. Casey, what's the worst thing that went on this year?
I think transition and new buildings are really tough. As you can imagine, if you have been through a building project in your own house, you imagine that punch list. And, when we moved in, there was still work happening, furniture being delivered and built. All of those things were happening concurrently, and we started with a 20,000 item punch list after we had already moved in. So you can imagine when you have, 100 items on your punch list at home, 20,000 felt daunting. And so the fact that now we're down to under 100 minus the flood damage, which added a few things. But, I think that transition period, and it's required a lot of flexibility on the part of families and students and teachers. This auditorium didn't open until 3 days before our first musical. So they had never really rehearsed on the stage before. They put up a great musical production. So it's just been working through the system.
Okay.
I'll just say that in that first week, which was exhausting and sweaty, at one point in my room, I tripped over a box, and I just sort of lay there on the floor for a while, just thinking about it, and I lay there so long that the automatic lights just shut off.
David, go ahead.
Yeah, Dave Pretty here. You were mentioning about how the kids have changed the culture. So can you give us a couple examples of what they have done that's new to the new HB? Because I know that in the past they've always done something that's pretty unique. Can you give us a couple examples of something they've done with the going vertical instead of having the spacious?
Yeah, it was interesting when the architects came to visit, and you probably didn't see it if you came after it was dark, but one of the things we were really surprised about, they said, we knew that the students at HB Woodlawn would use the walls as a canvas, but we never imagined that they would use the glass as a canvas. And I'm sure some of you saw in RL Now articles that it just really spontaneously, they started this back and forth with the office buildings across the street, putting Post-it note messages up back and forth with each other, playing tic-tac-toe, things like that. So, they have found ways. If you had asked me a year ago what I would have been really worried about, I would have been worried about the fact that there's a 7-Eleven 6 feet from our cafeteria. And, that was not ideal. Most of us would not plan to have a school 6 feet from a 7-Eleven. But, we've actually developed a pretty good partnership. And over time, originally they had all these vape products and bottles of wine at the front. And, our kids and us have worked with them to move all that to the back and, developed a really good rapport with the individuals who work there. And, it's a way for our kids to learn how to be good citizens out in the world. Parents who are worried about it, I always say, most 6th graders I know don't have their own source of money. If you don't want them buying Slurpees, there's an easy way to dry that up.
Katie, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Katie Kelly. I think when a lot of us first walked into this building, our first reaction was, oh my gosh, they're not done. And you kind of spoke to this already. You had a 20,000 item punch list. And I'm like, yes, I have renovated a house and I understand the punch list. So you now have 100 punch list items. I think a lot of us would agree. There seems like there might be closer to 10,000 punch list items. If you can just speak to like, what is it that you still need to see get done? How long is that going to take? Is this a budget issue? Kind of, I'm going to wrap another question into this that I was asked to ask. How much did this building cost? How much do we still see coming into this building with those additional punch list items?
Yeah, it probably looks worse right now because we did 3 weeks ago have a massive flood that was the fault of the construction company. So all of those repairs are being paid for by the construction company, not by APS or by taxpayers. So it does, and it happened right in that center area where you walked in. So there's some of that as you see painters, and obviously the gym floor was ruined. It does have a more unfinished look than we thought it was going to have, and I don't know that there's going to be any change to that. I don't think APS is going to be putting more money into this building. I think what's been spent is going to be what was spent. So right now the punch list is just finishing what the contractor has agreed to do. So, we are looking at ways that we can make a more industrial looking space feel more like a school and feel homier and more welcoming. So that will probably take time. Our old building felt like an old worn shoe, but I always tell our kids like that took 40 years to happen, so it's not going to happen overnight. So yeah, the floors, some of the concrete walls, I'm not privy to whether they were supposed to look different and then this was a cost-cutting thing or if this was really the intention. But I don't think that there's any intention to change much of that moving forward.
Okay, go ahead.
Hello, Elaine and Keith. I've been Arlington parent and a resident of Arlington for a long while at this point. So questions. First of all, Casey and the panel, thank you so much. It has been very interesting to listen to you. And I have two questions. Did the students participate in any way in designing the building? Where did the concept of the design come from? And did it inspire to create new classes or new initiatives, new programs? Now, once you're in a new space. Thank you.
I can give it a try. So the architects, the design architect is BIG, Bjarke Ingels Group, which is a very innovative. He made the Lego building in Billund, which is amazing. But they did talk to the teachers. They talked to the students. There was a lot of, they came and watched us one day. And it was a really interesting day because the kids were playing a game where the way that you didn't get tagged out was having a Frisbee on your head. And all these architects are like, what is going on? I don't understand. So I think that the main thing was trying to get the maximum space out of this footprint of this block that exists. So that's the main thing I can think of as they talk to you.
Yeah, and officially, as a part of the building process, if any of you have been a part of building a building in Arlington, there's the building level planning committee, and HB Woodlawn and Shriver both had a student that were on that committee. So they went to all those evening meetings with us. And then, again, another way that town meeting as a forum is really helpful is that there was a place where the architects would come regularly. So for example, if you went on a tour, we have these terraces. And one of the things that students said is even if we can't have like outdoor green space, like a field like we used to have, we would like outdoor spaces that just aren't right out on Wilson Boulevard. And so part of the design was like, how do you create safe spaces that are outside where students can be? So their input was included in things like that, as they said, this is something that we would like to be able to, we would like to still be able to eat lunch outside or run around a little bit. So town meeting would come the architects would come regularly to town meeting to get feedback on things like that. So yeah, they were involved. And in terms of the actual design, we had some input, but it was largely driven by the architects. There's things I would have done differently if I had been able to do that, but it is a challenging site. Right now we have no parking on site, and so in terms of changes, all the other high schools have on-site parking for students. We have no on-site parking for students. We have no on-site parking for staff. So we lease spaces a couple blocks away. It was not an easy site to build on, but I think they certainly came up with something interesting and innovative on the space.
Okay, Anne, are you next? Thank you for your question.
I'm Joan McDermott. I have a question about the transportation. I'm wondering where your school buses unload, if you have a kiss and ride line, if you have any walkers, and I was going to ask if any students were able to have cars. So if you could answer that. And then I have a second quick question. I'm wondering also if it's an open campus. Students, I think, used to be able to go elsewhere for lunch.
So the buses actually pick out that direction, out back on, is it 18th Street? That's sort of right now our street and the construction site next door's street. We do have some walkers. We have some kids who take public transportation. We have some kids who ride their bikes. And out front, where you all came in, is a 15-minute drop-off, and there's always sort of a little drop-off and pick-up there that happens. We do have an open campus for high school and for 8th graders if their parents give them permission. They are allowed. Sort of the rule is that if you're 8th grade, you're allowed to cross the street, 8th grade and up. 6th and 7th grade are not allowed to cross the street.
Just to add something onto that, I'm a bike share person too. Some of you guys maybe are too. There are 2 bike share stations nearby here, but I think you should petition the county to get you a bike share station right out front here. Then maybe more students would take.
Yeah, and I'll just add a little bit. They made some significant changes to transportation when we moved here. So we're the first school that APS is using what they call a hub stop model, so they're decreasing, rather than buses sort of winding all through the neighborhoods. Each bus only has 4 stops. So kids might have to walk a mile to a mile and a half, the same distance they would have to walk to a school, to their bus stop. So their walk is longer, but their bus ride is shorter. So rather than having 12 or 15 stops, it's just 4 stops per route. And it's worked out great. Parents were concerned about it, and it has really decreased those bus times. And additionally, we're part of a pilot program where we have about 100 students who are using iRide, using the art buses to get to school. And we're trying to move towards, could we get whole neighborhoods of kids to take the art bus here, especially for example, from the Pentagon City neighborhood, there's an art bus where it's just 1 stop right up here. And then, theoretically, over time, we might be able to reduce the number of buses that we're using to transport kids to HB Woodlawn. So we're, in a really transit-rich neighborhood here, and so we want to try to make sure that our students are using those resources as well.
I don't see any more questioners lined up here, but please, we still have a few more minutes, time for a question or two. Casey, how many students go here?
There are about 725 to 730 students at HB Woodlawn and another 50 students at the Shriver program. So our capacity here is about 775 students.
Tell me about the future. What's this school going to look like in some years?
Well, I'm sure the school will be different in some ways, similar in others. One of the things that we are really excited about in terms of moving here is the opportunity to go on field trips, being, we are 3 stops from all of the free museums in DC. And so whereas before you used to have to rely on school buses to get you downtown, it's a lot easier to take advantage of all the things that the DC area has to offer. So additionally, we have been working with the Roslyn Bid and a lot of the businesses nearby to work on creating internship opportunities for students, even if it's just sort of shadowing opportunities. So a lot of the businesses in this area have been excited to look for ways to partner with us. I know there was someone from the North Roslyn Civic Association. We had met with that group and some of the leadership there of a lot of the condos in this area, and they had said to us, Roslyn is unique in that it's a lot of really young people who live here and a lot of people who are over 60. And one of the things we could really use and that you could make your building useful to us is if you had open office hours for technology, and if high school kids could be available and we could bring our technology problems to you and know that from 4 to 6 every day there was somebody who could troubleshoot. So I think there's a lot of ways that we can partner with the people in our new neighborhood here. So once we're done with floods and coronavirus and all those things that are getting in our way with moving forward, I think there's a lot of potential for new ways we can engage in the community.
I know there's another question out there, maybe, and Eleanor has things to say here, but you bring up another question here. It might be of use to everybody around here. In general, what's Arlington Public Schools doing to meet any COVID-19 issues?
If only we, no. I mean, obviously, as all of us who are following the news, this is, an evolving issue. Every day we get a new update in the morning. Today we see, virtually all of the universities going to online classes. We're seeing sports, go to where we're not going to have fans. So these are all things. In one of the calls we had today, in a lot of ways, colleges and universities are set up to go to an online model more easily than a K through 12 system. Like, what does that, we don't want our K through 12 students sitting in front of a computer for 6 or 7 hours a day. So, we are spending a lot of time thinking about, if we did have to close schools, what does that look like? How can we make sure that students are still exercising, still have a way to engage with others? Eleanor teaches geography, and today they were testing how they could have all the kids in the class talking on one screen at one time, and it was a lot, but we're learning. We figure we might as well test some of this now so that we're ready if and when something like that happens.
And what did the town hall meeting say about this, Eleanor?
Actually, we were so busy talking about the independent block period that it didn't come up at town meeting. But it's something that in geography we've been talking about, one, because of the practical, like it is geography that we're seeing and the spread and in mapping. But also, I have been sort of like, well, what happens if we use this piece of technology? One of which was a complete failure, and we all agreed, yes, that would not be the way to communicate. A group chat with 8th graders involves a lot of emojis. It's no good. But we also talked about, the curve and lowering the curve, and I think it's important to talk with kids about these things in just a practical way so that they're not afraid either, so that they understand why. I don't think it would be good for a kid out of the blue to wake up tomorrow and hear they're not going to school for 2 weeks. So I think it's better for us to talk honestly with the kids about what's going on.
Okay, Timon, I know you are patiently waiting. Wait no more.
Hi, thanks, Lynn. First of all, I'd like to thank our speakers for coming down here. It's been a very enlightening evening. My question is to Casey. You said you came to HB as a student, now a principal. I'm just curious, do you feel like the current version of HB is in keeping with the spirit of the HB you attended as a student?
Yes, I do. We have a story that we tell about the second year of HB Woodlawn, and all the kids said, "Oh, it's so different from last year," and it was only 1 year in, and that HB Woodlawn, Wakefield, Washington, Liberty, Yorktown, every high school evolves and changes over time, and HB Woodlawn certainly has as well. When I went here, it was definitely a different, there, in some ways, more freedom, more, or I guess maybe it looked different, in terms of this was pre-SOLs, sort of before AP exams were the things that they are now. I think teachers had a lot more flexibility with their curriculum. So I think in terms of teaching, like in learning, HB Woodlawn doesn't look as different as it used to. In terms of culture and community, I think it continues to be an alternative option with regards to that community and culture.
Getting to the last word here, and it might be with Eleanor because she had something to add about the future.
Well, I was going to say, in this space, one of the things that we haven't mentioned, as we're sitting in this theater, is HB has a really strong music program, drama program. We also have a very vibrant and state championship Frisbee team as well, ultimate Frisbee team as well. But I would love to see in the future that we become sort of a center in Roslyn, that it's not just parents and students coming to shows, but that people in Roslyn realize, yes, that is a great deal for my $14 to come and see the musical or one of the 10 plays that's put on, most of which are directed by students every year. And so I think that's one thing that hopefully as we grow into this space that we will, like right now we're kind of figuring ourselves out, but I think that there's going to be more and more opportunities for us to really be a part of the community, and that's one of the ways.
Thank you. And thank you, Casey Robinson, and thank you, Eleanor Reed, and thank you, everybody who showed up here tonight. What a delightful evening this has been, right? That's the end of our program for today. I will say something next month, which is April. Depending on things beyond our control, but our plan is to have our meeting back at Marymount, and it will be on April 15th, 1 week later than it is usually, the third Wednesday instead of the second Wednesday, for religious reasons, and so that's what we did. And it will be on criminal justice reform in Arlington. So there you go. We'll see you all next month.